Hi guys, it's Emma, and today I'm going to be making the chocolate chip cookies on page 132, and we can go ahead and get started. I can show you guys the ingredients. My hypothesis for these cookies is that the crispy ones will be more spread out and thus be crispier, and then the puffed cookies will not be quite as spread out and not be crispy at all, and that the in-between will be kind of crispy, kind of cake-like in between the two. All right, I don't have them measured out yet, but for the pecans, I'm using Good and Gather. For the butter, I'm using Good and Gather, and for the shortening, I'm using Crisco. For the flour, I don't have the bag, but I can put in a picture. This is the all-purpose flour. And for the cake flour, I'm using King Arthur Baking Company. The baking powder the baking soda is Trader Joe's. The baking powder is Baker's Corner. The light brown sugar is also Baker's Corner. The vanilla extract is Golden Vanilla. And the milk is Friendly Farms 2%. The corn syrup is Market Pantry light corn syrup. The eggs are golden eggs, and the chocolate chips are Nestle Toll House semi-sweet chocolate chips. I forgot to say that I will be using Stone Mill iodized salt, iodized table salt for the salt in the ingredients list. And since I am using the pecans, I am going to I just set the oven to 350, and I'm gonna do all 3 cups of pecans at once in the oven, and then just put the butter in, and then divide them into 3, and just set them aside. And I've just put the pecans into the oven, and now I will start mixing the flour, salt, baking soda, and baking powder for the crisp cookies with the all-purpose flour into a bowl. So I just have my nuts. I just put the butter in it. It smells absolutely delicious. And then I just put all the flour, the baking soda, and not the baking powder. Excuse me. Just the crisp one doesn't call for baking powder. I was wrong. And then the salt in here. And now I'm gonna cream together the sugar and the butter. The higher protein in the all-purpose flour will allow it to absorb more of the water and for it to spread out more. All right, I just creamed the butter, white sugar, and light brown sugar in here. And I also forgot to mention the brand of white sugar I'm using, so I can put that right here. And now I'm just gonna add the light corn syrup. And butter is 81% fat, whereas shortening is 100% fat. Butter is 18% water, so in butter there is a lot more water that wants to escape out of the cookies, and that is what allows it to spread out so much more than the shortening. Brown sugar contains molasses, whereas white sugar doesn't. This allows the cookie to absorb more moisture and be softer, and then also get softer after sitting outside the oven. And this is what it looks like. It is very light and fluffy. It seems like it smells very good after adding the light corn syrup, and now I'm just gonna add the milk. Corn syrup will allow the cookie to be crispier and browner. And this is what it looks like after adding the milk. I don't know if you can really see, but to me it's very much lighter and holds much more of its composure. And now I'm gonna add the vanilla. It's interesting, the amount of milk or liquid that you use really affects the cookie. If you use a lot of milk, then the cookie will spread out since it's more liquidy. But if you only use a little bit of milk, then the cookie will not spread out as much. It will actually steam up and puff up. And this is what it looks like after adding the vanilla. Very light, very fluffy. And now I'm going to incorporate that dry mixture that I mixed earlier. Alright, I fully incorporated my dry ingredients slowly, and I'm going to use the spatula to push down the sides. Then I'm going to add the chocolate chips and the pecans. Alright, this crisp recipe batch is now going to go in the fridge, and I can get started on the puffed version. So I've just mixed the cake flour, salt, and baking powder for the puffed version of the recipe, and it's interesting. The cake flour, at least my cake flour, was much lighter. Cake flour, a lower protein flour, won't allow the water to absorb, or it doesn't soak up the water. Then the water turns into steam in the oven, and it doesn't spread out. The baking powder has its own acids in it, and it also doesn't neutralize any of the acids in the cookie, so this allows it to, and also it's supposed to make the cookies spread less. And I've now creamed together the shortening and the brown sugar for the puffed version. Now I'm going to add an egg. And this is the mixture after the egg. I think it's definitely pretty fluffy, although not as fluffy as the crisp one in my opinion. And now I'm going to add the vanilla. The egg will set and harden in the oven, allowing the cookie to become firmer and not spread out as much in the oven. And this is it after the vanilla. It's interesting. It's not as light, and it's definitely a darker brown because of the molasses from the brown sugar. And now I'm going to add the dry mixture in. And this is it after incorporating the dry ingredients slowly. And it's interesting. It's much more of a dough-like than the crispiness one. It sticks together. It was on almost all of it was on the paddle when I first took it off. And now I'm going to incorporate the chocolate chips and the pecans. And this is it after incorporating the pecans and the nuts. And now I will put in a bowl and let it chill in the fridge. Alright, I've now started on the in-between recipe. I've already put together the cake flour, salt, and baking powder into a bowl, and now I'm just in the mixer. I'm going to do cream together the butter, shortening, and light brown sugar. And this is the mixture once I've added the butter, shortening, and light brown sugar. Now I'm going to add the light corn syrup. And this is it after adding that light corn syrup. Now I'm going to add that egg, and it looks different. Then it looks lighter, to me it looks less brown as the puffy one. And this is it after that egg. It's definitely much more cohesive now and thicker too. So now I'm going to add that vanilla. And this is it after adding that vanilla. It's definitely in between color wise to the crispiness. It's not as white and light as the crispiness, but it's not as dark as that the puffed version. So now I'm going to add and incorporate slowly those dry ingredients. And this is the dough once the dry mixture is all incorporated. Definitely an in-between texture wise too. It's not as clumped together as that puffy mixture, but it's not as liquid like as that crisp mixture. And now I'm just going to add the chocolate chips and the pecans. And this is the mixture after I've incorporated the pecans and the chocolate chips. Now I let it sit in the fridge, and I'll keep checking on all three mixtures until they reach the same temperature. All right, I'm back. They have all been chilling for quite a bit now. They're all hovering around 56, 57, 58. I can show you guys with the thermometer. And there is quite a difference in between the texture and the color. This is the crisp one. It is much lighter and much more, I guess, much more not as, just the difference between this one and this one is very stark. This is much browner and much less wet, if that makes sense. And this is kind of nice in between. This is the in-between one, and this is the puffy one. The puffy one is reading at 57, and the in-between is measuring around 58, and the crisp one is measuring around 56. And now I'm gonna use this ice cream scoop and scoop some of each batch onto a baking sheet with parchment paper. And we want to keep the cookies cold, at least as cold as possible before they go in the oven, because the colder the cookies enter the oven, the less they will spread and the better they will turn out. But that is if you want the cookies to be not spread out. If you want them to spread out, you would leave them at room temperature. And here are my cookies. I decided to be a little conservative with the placement because I didn't know how much they are going to spread out. And for the actual scoop, I tried to be pretty consistent with the scooping because I don't want them to be different sizes. So try to use just the scoop and not like anything outside of the scoop on all of them. So now I will put them in the oven for the amount of time that the recipe says, and I will switch them halfway through to make sure that they cook evenly. These are the cookies after, and there is definitely quite a big difference. This is after 12 minutes total, and the crisp ones expanded a lot more outwardly, and they are not nearly as tall, if you can see that. And so I'm going to take these crisp ones off the baking sheet. They even look a little overdone, so I might tweak that when I make the rest of my crisp cookies to see what time works best for those crisp cookies. And the puffy ones, the in-between and the puffy ones look quite similar, so I will wait for them to cool and then see how they taste. As I'm making the other cookies, or the rest of my cookies, I'm noticing that this puffy batch is really quite crumbly. I almost feel like I have to like roll it into a ball. The cookies are all finished now. The puffy ones definitely, some of them were a little crumbly to form, like this one. And the in-between cookies held their shape the best, for the most part. And the crisp cookies, I did end up playing with the time, and these two are ones that I put in for the total of 12 minutes, but all the rest, it's kind of hard to tell now that they're all have had time to set. But I found that 8 minutes was the most convenient or best time for these crisp cookies. The crisp cookie is definitely much crispier, especially as it has had time to sit and harden. It is very crunchy, very crispy, and these ones are a nice in between the puffy and the crispy. The thin cookie is so thin and spreads out so much more is because of the only using the butter. It melts faster, and also the corn syrup in that recipe adds a little bit of crispiness, especially around the edges. The corn syrup also adds color, a nice color to it, to brown the edges, and also the milk doesn't really puff it up and allows it to spread out more. And the science behind the puffed version of the cookies is the cake flour. It absorbs more of the liquid, so it doesn't spread out as much, and also the shortening doesn't melt quite as fast in those cookies and doesn't allow for as much spreading out. And the lower amount of baking soda decreases the acidity also, which also stops the spread of the cookies. The egg allows the cookie to puff up instead of spread out, and the brown sugar keeps the cookie's moisture better and balances out that egg puffiness. And the in-between cookies are somewhere in between because they use cake flour and they have an egg, but they also have corn syrup, and they also use half butter, half shortening. Baking soda neutralizes the acidity of the cookies and allows the cookies to brown better and also spread out more. It's interesting that the in-between cookie, to me, it seemed closer to the puffed version of the cookies than the crispy version, just because the crispy was so spread out and so flat. My brother, I gave him a blind taste test, and he ranked the puffy version as number 1. He said to him it was really similar to the texture of Crumble, the cookie store, if you've ever tasted that. And then he put the crisp ones as number 2, just that they had less flavor in his opinion. And number 3, the in-between, and he said that it needed a better aftertaste. He claimed he could taste more of the baking powder in the aftertaste. Personally, I ranked I knew what I was tasting, and I do have a preference towards crisp cookies, and I ranked the crisp ones as number 1, the in-between as number 2, and the puffed versions as number 3. And during this experiment, I was thinking, just wrote down some ideas as I was going along about possible experiments that could be done in the future. And I think the size of scoop would be really interesting, because obviously a bigger cookie would be different. Like a different scoop would lead to different sized cookies, which could probably affect the crispiness, the time it takes to cook them, and how much they spread out. And I think it was interesting, the refrigeration. I think that it would be fun to play with how cold the cookies are. Supposedly the ones that are colder, I hypothesize that they would not spread out as much. And I think it would be interesting to see the difference between cooking spray and parchment, because cookies supposedly stick more often to just like cooking oil or cooking spray than parchment paper, and to see how that affects the crispiness of the edges. And also just playing with time. It was quite interesting with those crisp cookies to see they really did not need nearly as much time as the others, and I thought it was really interesting. And I think even I could have gone like not 7 minutes. I think it could have even gone less than 8 minutes. It was really quick. And then I think it would be interesting to test like egg versus milk for the puffiness, because milk, a good amount of milk is supposed to allow the cookie to spread out more. So just to play with that aspect. And I think the measuring methods would be really interesting too, because when I was measuring, I kind of didn't know exactly if it was super consistent. I tried to make it consistent with the way that the author explained how she measures. I can put that citation in. But it didn't seem very consistent, especially with the cake flour. It felt like I was using so much more cake flour because it was so much more or less compact, or it was a lot lighter, so I felt like I was using more. Maybe I don't know. But I think there definitely is something behind those measuring methods, and just seeing which one is the most consistent. Like weighing would obviously be the most consistent, but the reaching in the bag and then reaching in the bag and getting flour and then using the versus putting like flour into a cup, seeing what the difference with that is. And I think it'd be really interesting to do an experiment with honey versus sugar, because honey is supposed to allow the sugar, the cookies to soften and get softer after coming out of the oven. But then also to play with maple syrup. I don't know what that is supposed to do with cookies or baking, but I think it would be interesting to see the effect of honey versus maple syrup, and then of course brown sugar too.